Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Bible Nerds podcast. Today is going to be a great day to talk about the Bible and nerd out.
Yep.
We actually have a very special guest. He is part of the Bible Nerd team. He's
the delinquent member.
the delinquent member.
That just writes and does not come to podcasts.
Well, you're in for a treat because today he is here. And we're going to have... So please welcome Kuya Mike.
Hi, Kuya Mike.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Tisha.
And of course, Tish is joining me.
Yep.
I'm Ben, by the way. My dad is not here because he is in the US
Yep.
for...
He has a concert.
He has a concert. So
World tour.
if you are in the US, well, probably by the time you're listening to this, he's already back home. But but maybe if you are in the US, maybe you'll get a chance to catch him there performing his for one night only his special well, actually I don't know anything about that, but let us talk about the Bible.
Let's go.
So we're here to talk about Numbers chapters 11 to 12, right, coming right after our last episode. And joining us, as we mentioned, is Kuya Mike, who actually wrote the talk
Thank you,
in
Kuya Mike.
the feast where we touched these chapters. And just wanted to ask you, Kuya Mike, what was it like for you writing for this talk?
Actually, when you look at the journey that we've been on, especially just coming from Leviticus, which had to deal with a lot of instruction and like, okay, this is the way you do things and things like that. Going back to like a story format where there are actually things happening apart from instruction. It was refreshing. Kasi,
Go.
pwede mag-Taglish siya na. Kasi sa Leviticus, parang, okay, we're trying to like unearth stuff from instructions or directives given by God. Here, you're seeing people move, things happening, make mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think it was a bit easier to write.
It's like life.
Yeah.
Like
How is that like life?
Diaries of people in the wilderness.
Yeah,
Something like that. Yeah.
But I heard it somewhere that it was a travelogue.
Travelogue.
Yeah.
That's nice.
travelogue.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. There were no vlogs back then, so
It's a travel log.
I guess this would have to do. Yeah. And here, so last episode we covered Numbers chapter 1 to 10. Just a brief overview. But I think today we'll have some time to dive into the chapters 11 and 12. And we're off to a rough start.
Yeah, because they were setting up the whole travel.
The first 10
journey.
chapters was all about the preparing for the journey.
Yep.
You know, you don't want to forget the passports, the sunblock,
Even the seating arrangements.
seating arrangements.
Like they numbered everybody.
Yeah, so they numbered everybody and they arranged them in a very special order around the tabernacle, right? And God gave them special instructions on how to move out.
And even tasks.
And things to do.
Carrying this.
Yep.
You get it from the bank carousel.
Yeah. And a particular tribe out of the 12 tribes was appointed for a special role to do that. That's what Kuya Mike was talking about. And they did everything that the Lord commanded. So they're all set, right? They did all the preparations, and now it's time to venture. This is the first part of their journey. Like they opened the door out of the house.
Yeah.
We're ready. We're going.
leaving the plains of Sinai, right? The surrounding area of Sinai, which was a relatively fertile area. And so now it's their first taste of the wilderness after 1 year of being camped in this place. And everything goes horribly wrong.
Just 3 days in, right? 3 days in.
3 days
Taking
in.
this promise from God that, okay, we're going to go to the promised land.
Yep.
And that's the journey. And then 3 days in, we come into Numbers 11.
Yeah. Why don't we read that? So Numbers 11, verse 1 to 2, right? Now the people complained about the evil that they were experiencing in the hearing
from the ESV, right?
This is a compilation of translations.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay.
But yeah, the base is ESV. I just highlighted some of the words in Hebrew that I think are important for us to note. Anyway, so now the people complained about the evil that they were experiencing, and the Lord heard it. And when he heard them, his anger was aroused. Right. So the moment that they stepped foot outside Sinai, right, and into this area in the desert, they thought it was evil. It's kind of like you're on a family trip, road trip. You the parent, you know where you're going. You know it's gonna be a great place.
Yeah.
But your kid's in the car.
I don't like it here.
They don't like the car. They don't like how the car smells. They don't.
Are we there yet?
It's interesting because like in the NLT, it's rendered as soon the people began to complain about their hardship.
Yeah.
So I guess it simplifies that.
The word hardship is the word ra in Hebrew, or evil. Yeah. So for them, stepping outside of Sinai, the moment they began their journey towards the promised land, that was already too much evil for them. It's too much hardship for them.
And they start complaining.
Complaining. And God doesn't like it. He gets angry. He gets angry. And this is something that we're going to see repeatedly.
Again and again.
Again and again. And maybe these passages are difficult to read, uncomfortable. Me and Kuya Mike, before we started recording, we were talking about how the passages personally make us uncomfortable, like because we're used to reading about God, who's so patient and so loving, compassionate. None of these verses are contradicting that, right?
Okay.
This is a snapshot of a particular response that God has towards these people in this moment of their journey, right, with them. Meaning we aren't seeing how God acts all the time in this moment.
And then there's the idea that you also anthropomorphize God, giving him an emotion of anger.
Sure, it's how we anthropomorphize him being compassionate. Right. So the
Sorry,
picture,
just for the interest of our audience, anthropomorphize is like putting a
human
attribute or characteristic to God,
which is what the Bible does all the time.
Yes, because because those who wrote it had probably an idea of who God is, but cannot fully extensively.
And that's what we do. Which is an interesting point. I hope we don't rabbit trail too much on this one.
Yeah, we should move on. Yeah.
But that's what we do. That's how we relate to God.
Yeah.
When we worship Him, the way that we talk to Him is we talk about Him like a father. Yeah. We talk to Him like He's a friend. We talk about and to Him using human terms.
Exactly. Our limitation can only capture
and that's not bad.
Yeah.
In fact, I would even go to say that I think maybe God wants us to relate to Him in that way. I mean, yes, He's transcendent and holy, and we focused on that in Leviticus. But in we clearly see that because God has a relationship with these people, it entails these very human responses or reactions to what's going on. Because if God didn't care, if we really think about it, the God of the universe shouldn't really care whether or not this group of humans are following Him to the T.
Yeah.
But apparently He does, and that's fascinating. It's really interesting. Anyway, let's move a little bit forward. We have to remember that we're picking up in the middle of this 2-year journey that God has already
from Exodus,
that God has already been going with the Israelites. And so God getting angry at the Israelites complaining at their first on their first footsteps in the desert.
It's not the first time though, actually.
It's not the first time. It's the first time in 1 year.
So from Egypt to Sinai, there were a lot of complaints.
There was a lot of complaints already.
There were a lot of moments I wanted to go back.
And each time God responded with compassion, with gentleness, with showing Him His faithfulness to them by providing the things that they needed, that they lacked. And And so now we're going to go back into the wilderness, this time to go to the promised land.
Yep.
And the moment that they step foot out, it's like repeat all over again.
Yeah, and I guess if we were talking about how God was a bit frustrated with this response, and you were saying that
it makes sense why God is frustrated.
Kumbaga, you're expecting now na, okay, we've been together long, you know me more, you've matured in our relationship together.
That's the picture.
Right? And I already gave you the instructions about the tabernacle and all of these things, how to come closer to me. And then now you're still complaining.
Yep.
Diba? Parang,
and I guess God's response is also because it's higher stakes now. I've made you guys my people. You're already holy. And you have this responsibility. And now that they're going to do this again, it's a different response as to Exodus. Now, before it was, okay, more compassionate. Sure. But now it's like higher stakes.
Yeah. Like I would be more patient with Kyler, my son, at this season.
Yes.
But if he is older and he knows better and still complains and whines about the same thing, medyo parang I expect more from you now.
Right.
Yeah, that's I think that's the picture here. And so we keep reading.
Yeah.
Right? So the Lord's anger was aroused. Then fire from the Lord burned among them and ate. Yeah. So the word here is watokal in Hebrew, which is the same word of eating the fruit from the tree of knowledge. It's the same watokal.
Wow.
Right? So God's fire consumes or eats the outskirts or the edges of the camp. Right? And obviously that's terrifying.
Yep.
Right? But this is God responding to the people's rebellion. Right? And in some sense, God is responding gently with the people. So nobody is. This is kind of like the picture of when they were traveling to the Red Sea, and before God parted because it took a whole day to part the Red Sea. And while the Egyptians were on their trail, God put a wall of fire behind them to separate the Egyptians from the Israelites. So that's kind of like the picture. God's fire consumes or eats the edges of the outskirts of the camp. So nobody is getting hurt. God is just showing him, hey, listen to me.
This is me.
This is me who was with you in the wilderness.
Okay, now it makes sense. Yeah.
And so the people cried out to Moses. And so Moses prays to God. And the fire dies down.
Yep.
So this is the first, of the 3 fall sequences that are going to happen in Numbers 11 to 12.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I think it's really important to talk about this because I was highlighting how the Israelites were complaining about the evil that they were experiencing, right? God's fire consuming the outskirts or eating the outskirts of the camp. The language that's being used in Numbers 11 and 12 are remarkably familiar.
Yeah.
Right? Evil, eating.
Yeah.
Later on, we're going to see desire and good. Like these are all language from Genesis chapter 3.
Yep.
Right.
What we actually talked about this in a previous episode on hyperlinks. When you notice biblical authors using repeated words from previous stories,
using the same terms,
using the same words, and a high concentration of them, there's a huge chance that the author is trying to make you recall the previous story and put it in the forefront.
That's right.
And this is what I think the author of Numbers is doing. He wants you to think of the Genesis 3 fall sequence where Adam and Eve, they disobey and rebel against God.
Yep.
And we're going to see it happen 3 times. It's this constant cycle of these themes really in these first 5 books of the Bible.
Yeah.
And we're really seeing it here. Where the first 1 to 10 chapters, right? God ordains and appoints these humans, giving them a special role.
Right.
He orders their camp and creates a safe place for them.
A dry land.
A dry land for them.
Yeah.
And he even enters in and dwells with them.
Yes.
And he says he's going to journey with them,
Yeah.
right? He's going to rest with them. But what happens, what follows it,
again,
right? Sorry, if you haven't been following along, that's Genesis 1 language of ordering and appointing a human. So that's what we see in chapters 1 to 10. Here in 12 and 13, we see what comes after, which is Genesis 3, the fall.
Okay.
Yes.
It's the fall times 3, because we're going to see 3 stories of the people complaining and rebelling.
Wow.
And the complaining now is, and I'll shift gears.
Yeah, go.
The complaining now is centered on their diet.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Maybe we aren't shifting gears. Maybe it's the same thing.
Yeah, well, yeah, same thing.
Yeah,
the
because
rebellion is expressed through like not liking the environment, the hardship that they're in.
Yeah.
Particularly on what they're eating.
Sure, exactly. It's a food problem. It's a food problem, just like in Genesis 3, where it was a question of what they should or shouldn't eat.
That's right.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's very, like, once you see it, you cannot unsee it.
Yeah.
Right? The language being used, the sequence of events, it's really this reflection of how humans fail to trust in God. Right? This is what we're saying, that they've already gone through the wilderness and God has already shown them, shown them his faithfulness, how he does good to them in the wilderness. That's actually what Moses says just the chapter before in Numbers chapter 10. He tells his brother-in-law, right, that we will do tov to you, we will do good to you, for the Lord has promised tov, good to Israel, right? And the story right after that is the Israelites complaining about the evil, the evil that they're experiencing on account of them because of the Lord.
Yeah.
Which I think is because they lost sight of the good that was promised to them. Or they lost sight, or they take it for granted, or napagsawaan na nila yung kabutihan ni Lord.
They're redefining good and evil for themselves.
Like Genesis 3.
Like Genesis 3.
So for me, parang they're saying, oh, if those are the lens, they're saying, oh, it was good for me back in Egypt.
Yeah.
That's what's good for me. The meat, the food.
Yes.
I'm jumping ahead, but yeah.
Sorry, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
That's the picture.
Okay.
That's the picture, because Yahweh is saying it's good that we're going to go into the wilderness because I'm going to bring you to a land with milk and honey. Right? Now, I know it doesn't look good right now.
Because all you're eating is sky bread.
It's sky bread.
Or mana.
The desert is an inhospitable place.
Oh.
You know, like it's hot, it's dry.
Yeah.
Have you seen that meme of Obi-Wan Kenobi aging? So like if you're a Star Wars fan like me, there's been like this influx of Disney Plus Star Wars series where we see characters that span like decades apart from each other, and they look exactly the same. But Obi-Wan Kenobi, who's stuck in Tatooine, right, the sands of the desert of Tatooine, waiting for Luke to grow up, right, for 20 years, looks way older than anybody else. So I don't know, this picture of the wilderness, what the wilderness does to you. You turn into Obi-Wan Kenobi. from Jesus to he looked like Jesus in the prequels, and then now he just looks like some old blind guy. Anyway, where were we? Okay, so let's move on. So the first complaint was just like stepping on. It's so hot. There's no plants or anything. Like, what are we gonna? This is evil. Why are you bringing this evil upon us? Second complaint, right? This is in Numbers chapter 11, verse 11. Oh, sorry,
4.
Verse 4.
4.
Yeah. Why don't you read it, Tisha?
The rabble with them began to crave.
crave
other food. And again, the Israelites started wailing and said, "If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost. Also the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna." They're tired of manna, of sky bread. I like that.
No, I took that from Bible Project. But anyway, so imagine they were getting it for free. The manna was falling off heaven every morning.
Yes.
And that's what sustained them for the last 2 years.
It's a trustworthy provision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That they didn't have to work hard for.
Yeah.
And then now they're saying, sawa na ako dyan.
Yeah.
Pwede bang bumalik tayo sa Egypt kasi may karne doon. Diba?
Yeah.
This is not, this is familiar, right? Because this has already happened.
Yeah.
Right? In Exodus chapter 15, verse 23 to 26, we have a similar story where the Israelites were complaining about the lack of food in the desert.
Exactly.
And that's what prompts God to provide them with the manna.
Yeah.
Right? And also the quail.
Yeah.
Right?
Quail is what? Like chicken, right? Or like
I've
some
never
fowl.
tried.
Yes.
I've only had quail eggs, but I've never had
I don't think that's I don't know. I'm not sure if there's a
different bird.
It's some kind of bird.
There's no modern version of it. I
Maybe.
Yeah. But the closest is
Quail.
maybe chicken. But just a fowl.
Fowl.
I mean
okay.
FOW. Yeah.
Oh,
FOW.
I see. That's interesting.
Oh.
Right. So it's a similar problem.
Yeah.
But the difference here is we've already gone 2 years in the journey. Right. And this is actually the same time. So when they were on the second month.
On the first year.
Yeah. On the second month of the first year, that's when they complained about no food. Right. And then here on the second year of the second month, they're complaining about no food again.
The same time.
No, not no food, but
correct.
That for them has maybe they've been saturated. They're
a lack of variety.
So
there. So in the first time, the first occurrence, they're complaining because of a lack of food. But here they're complaining about a lack of variety. That they're tired of manna. Right? And then the biblical author goes on to remind us of what the manna is, right? He says that the manna is described looking like coriander seed or bdellium, like this precious. That if you do a concordance search in the Bible of the word bdellium, the only place where you see it is actually in Genesis, in the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is described to have the land was filled with these precious stones like bdellium and onyx, right? So this manna bread, the sky bread that they were eating, was almost like a taste of Eden in the wilderness that God was providing for them. I like what you mentioned, how they didn't have to work for it. They just had to gather it. It's really this imagery of Eden.
No, I was gonna say, like, I read somewhere in one of the commentaries in preparing this message that they actually had different ways to cook or serve manna.
That's right.
So there were various ways of eating
that's what the author says.
Yeah.
That's what the author says, that it tastes like olive oil, and then they can bake it into cakes. They can do all sorts of stuff with it.
So there was some sort of variety, but the base was still the same.
Yeah.
And so that's why they
want to eat meat.
And they wanted to have meat.
Now, I think there's a interesting thing to note here, that in the ancient time, eating meat every day was not common.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? God actually did not provide the quail or the chicken the entire 1 year.
Just the manna.
Just the manna. They only had quail that time on the second month of the first year, because that's when these birds were migrating. And
so they had it before.
They had it before,
right? Yeah.
God provided the manna, and manna every day for the past 2 years, and then He gave them quail on that particular time in Exodus 15 when they complained.
Okay,
right. Yeah. So they didn't have it every day. They had the manna every day. So here they're complaining that there's no meat. Right? We want to eat meat and all those vegetables and fruits.
Which they enjoyed back in Egypt. Under slavery.
Under slavery.
So they'd rather go back there, have their full board meal under slavery, And
I just find it interesting because, like, I think I don't know where you are in the world, and of course it's different for vegans, but I think for most people, especially Filipinos, we eat pork, we eat meat every day. Yeah. Like we have adobo, we have sinigang. Like that's just normal to us. But these people have not had meat the whole year, and then now they're craving for meat.
Yep.
It's just like a funny picture in my head. But like, I kind of sympathize because of
just to nuance this a bit, it's funny because the passage starts out with the term rabble. Yeah. And maybe that's something we should like clarify as well. So at least from the research that I got was that these were people who joined, or Egyptians who joined them when they exited Egypt. Yeah. So they were actually, well, you could say foreigners or not necessarily Israelites who I think instigated the complaining.
Yeah.
And then
they joined in.
Yeah, the Israelites just joined in. Yeah. Parang naalala nila bigla, oo nga, no? Yeah. So ginatungan na lang nila, nakiride sila na parang... Right. And sometimes that happens, right? Like, someone complains, and even if you didn't complain about it originally, you suddenly feel the same way.
I kind of want to eat some leeks and onion.
So that's one preaching point there, that there are some people in our lives who...
You should avoid. You should trust me on that.
No, it's just...
Make sure who you listen to.
Or people complain, don't be carried away.
Sure.
Anyway,
but so that's the problem, right? It's an eating problem. It's a food problem.
Yeah.
That God has been providing for them, this abundance of manna, right? But they want to eat meat, right? They want something that God has not provided for them.
The abundance of manna didn't sound good anymore. That sounded bad. What sounded good was
the past
flipped upside down.
Yep.
Right. Exactly. And like, so if Genesis 3 is on the brain, you're thinking of how in the garden there was this abundance of fruits, of seed-bearing trees, and God told them, "Don't eat of one fruit from one tree," but that's what they desired. Right? That's what they desired. So it's very interesting. The word that the rabble with them began to crave. The word is ta'ava.
Ta'ava.
Yes, which is the word for desire in Genesis 3. Wow. When Eve ta'ava saw the fruit of the tree of that it was good for eating. And it was beautiful to look at.
It was ta'ava.
Yeah, it was ta'ava. That's the where ta'ava is there. Beautiful. Its beauty was desirable. That would be another way to translate it. She took it. So in the same way, they were desiring
a different food.
Yes, a different food. Right.
Yeah.
That's the picture. And
they were willing to go back for it. Right?
Yeah.
They were willing to go back to their old life, to their past life of slavery.
Sure. Yeah.
Just for that taste of what probably gave them familiarity or somewhat of a comfort food.
Yeah. And that pissed off Moses.
Yeah.
That really, really pissed off Moses.
That was like the one straw that broke, or the last straw that broke the camel's back. And he goes on himself also complaining to God.
Yeah.
About the people that he's leading.
Yep.
Yeah, he's so angry. Yeah. And he composes this piece of angry Hebrew poetry.
Lament? Is it a lament?
It's a lament.
Yeah.
And it's so when I'm angry, I'm not able to speak in poetry, but it's a beautiful chiasm. We've talked a bit about chiasms and
literary sandwich.
Yeah, in literary structure in the podcast before. Yeah. But it's this really eloquent and well designed lament to God, and I think that's something that you highlighted in the talk, that it was to God.
Yeah, because both parties complained, or Moses and the Israelites complained, but Moses complained to God and sought the solution from God. while as the Israelites complained, yes, to God as well, but sought out the solution from Pharaoh or from Egypt.
Right.
Yeah. And so Moses brings his complaint to God. He says, "Why have you brought evil, Ra, right, upon your servant? Why have I not found favor in your sight, that you have put a burden of all this people on me? Did I conceive all these people? Or did I give birth to them, that you should say to me, carry them in your arms, as a nurse carries a nursing infant to the land which you swore their fathers? Where am I going to get the meat to give to all these people? For they weep before me, saying, give us meat so that we may eat. I am not able to carry all these people by myself, for it is too burdensome for me. So if you are going to deal with me this way, please kill me now, if I have found favor in your sight, and do not let me see this evil." So for Moses, it's better to die than to deal
with these people,
with these rebellious and
it's leadership frustration, di ba? Kumbaga, if you're leading a people who's been constantly like a pain,
obnoxious, and like never satisfied.
Right.
Yes, and now he's unburdening. He's venting out. God.
Yeah. And what's so interesting is, so God responds. He listens. He shemas. He listens to Moses's 2-point problem. Right? So he's going to send food.
So the problem is the provision or the food.
Yeah. He's going to send the Israelites want to eat. So God's going to send them food. An overabundance of food, enough for 600,000 people, apparently, or more. And he's also going to respond to the leadership problem, right? The burden of carrying all these people
by himself,
right? And both solutions, God provides one solution for both problems, which is His Spirit.
Wow.
Okay, so how does that work out? Let's look into the.
What do you want to do first?
We can
quail or the.
Let's do this.
Elders?
The elders first.
The elders first. Okay.
So go.
Okay. So God proposes a practical solution to be able to pastor or shepherd better. This whole number, how many they are. This thousands of people of the Israelites by appointing was it 40 or 70? 70 elders. 70 elders to be able to take care of the spirit of the people. And so he
calls them to gather around the tabernacle, right? The place where God dwells. And while they're there, God's Spirit
pours out on them. So
now it's not just Moses who has God's Spirit to guide him and to assist, that's the reason why he has the authority to lead the people, because God's Spirit is with him.
Now it's with 70 more.
So
the burden is now halved or like delegated.
In fact,
among other
there
people
were two
who were absent.
There were two guys who were part of the list, right, of the 70 people. It's such a funny little anecdote in the story. I don't know, maybe they got lost on the way, or maybe one of them had to do a number 2 or something. But they were just not there when everybody else.
They weren't in the room where it happened.
When the 68 people were in the around the tabernacle, and yet while they were not there, God's Spirit also comes down on them, and they start prophesying in the camp. And it's this picture of overabundance of God's presence, His provision, His Spirit. It's now flowing not just to Moses, but on all these people,
even those who didn't come.
And Moses even says this interesting thing at the end of the whole thing that
I wish everybody,
if only everybody was filled with the Spirit.
Wow.
And the reason why the author of Numbers gave highlight to those two, Eldad and Medad, was because there were two that called out Moses,
right?
For
being
God,
jealous,
for God pouring out the Spirit on the two that weren't
Di
there.
na nga sila pumunta sa
Di na sila pumunta, di na sila pakita, pero they were still blessed. They were still anointed. And so they were calling some technicality. Why is that so? Yeah. And that was the response of Moses, the beautiful wisdom-filled response of Moses.
Which is really important. Let's hold that thought as we look at the second story.
Okay.
Right? The second part of the problem.
So there's jealousy here already. Apart from complaining, there's jealousy happening already. Can we say that?
Sure. Oh. The second part of the problem being the food.
The food, yeah.
Okay. So do you have... I have the text here. I'll read it here. So now a wind... Okay. So the word for wind in Hebrew is the same word for spirit. So now a wind burst forth from the Lord. Right? So in both stories, God sends his wind or his spirit to enact and do something, right? So in the first one, his spirit comes and dwells into the 70 elders and Moses. And here, the wind bursts forth, and it brings quail from the sea and drop them beside the camp. About a day's journey on this side and a day's journey on the other side, all around the camp, right? And they were so many, there were so many quail that if you stack them up, right, it would be about 2 cubits deep or 3 feet tall on the surface of the ground. That's how many quail God sent.
Dang.
And I find this interesting because, I don't know, like sometimes God will have you have what you want, even if it's not good for you.
Interesting.
Right? Because, I don't know, okay, go on with what, I just wanted to
that's interesting thought. Let's see how this unfolds. Right? But there, remember, they want to eat something different. They have not had quail. The last time they had quail was last year. God sends them quail. And this time, it's an overabundance of quail, right?
Parang sa akin nga, I was imagining God. Of course, this is, again, just a limitation. I was thinking, ayun talagang gusto mo. Sige, so ito, sige, have as much as you want. Like, parang ganyan. And I think the reason I mentioned that is because, and we saw this even with the flood narrative where the Lord just allows the consequences of that.
Sure.
Of, at least in this case, the consequences of their craving.
I was thinking of the way that I see it is God was showing them that you can trust me.
Okay.
That you think that there's no abundance here in the wilderness. I can send this much.
Yeah.
This much quail. Now, but let's see how they respond to it. Okay? Because this is where it gets interesting, right? So there were piles of birds up to 3 feet high, right? So much birds. So what would be the natural inclination? Or what would be the first thought of humans when they see only wings?
Only wings.
Let's try to eat as much as we can, even if it's obscene. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to eat like 50 pieces of chicken wings, even if the next day I'm going to get sick.
Yeah.
Right? That's the first thought that comes to mind. Now, I want you to remember the first time in Exodus 15 when God sends the quail and the manna, God's instruction to them was to get only 1 homer. It's an ancient measurement, which is actually quite sizable. It's really big, right? 1 homer of the manna and the quail per person, per family. So some families gathered a lot, some gathered a little. Now, here in Numbers chapter 11, it says that the person who gathered the least gathered 10 homers of birds. 10 homers!
More than what
it's insane.
Eat.
It's insane. Like the commentary was saying that's like 500 gallons worth of birds, and like that's just it's this exaggerated amount of how the Israelites who went after the birds really did not, like, they were like, we might never see these birds ever again, and so let's go and eat everything, let's go grab everything.
Okay.
Which is what we saw in Exodus 15, that when they tried to do that with the manna, it would spoil. Right? Because God told them, only get what is enough for you.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm going to provide. You can trust me. I can bring enough quail to fill a swimming pool. Right? 3 feet deep here in the wilderness. Just get what you need. But here they get they get greedy. They desire after this thing. And it says in the text that they spent all day, all night, and the day after to just collect all the birds.
Wow.
Isn't that like insane? You know, the reason why they have like the time limit in Sangyup, right? Because I feel like we Filipinos, if we could live there, we would, because
only wings.
Yeah.
So there was an expression of God's abundance, and their response was greed.
Yes.
They wanted more than what they could handle or eat.
Yes, exactly.
That's one good angle, yeah.
And so this is what happens in the story. While the meat was still between their teeth, before they even got to chew it, right? The anger of the Lord was kindled against this people, and the Lord struck the people with a very severe plague.
Wow.
Right. So it's intense.
Yeah.
It's tough, and we don't like seeing God like this.
Yeah.
But like when you're following the story, you kind of get it, because at this point you're really frustrated at the Israelites.
That's why I mentioned earlier that I found it interesting that sometimes, you know, God will let you have what you want.
Yeah.
Even if it's not good for you.
Yeah.
And I say that because I guess in God's wisdom, He does this to lead us to repentance. That in His love and being a just God, He would sometimes allow the full course of the consequences of our sinfulness, of our craving, of our addiction, of our stubbornness, to run its full course to accelerate us towards transformation,
which is what we've talked about previously in the flood narrative.
Yeah, exactly. And I that was the picture that I saw. I was looking at when I was looking at this. That was what I was reminded of. That God will, sige, parang yan ang gusto mo talaga. Sige, pagbibigyan kita. Have it all, ganyan. But you know it's gonna be bad for you, and then this will lead you eventually back to me.
Yeah. I mean, I would also get sick, like severely sick, if I had that much chicken wings.
Even if you haven't had chicken wings for a year.
Yeah. No, like I would get stricken with a plague of the runny bowels. But there you go. So what is happening? There are two stories. Clearly, there are so many parallels going on with Genesis 3. Yeah. The author wants you to be thinking of Genesis 3 because it's a question of eating.
Yeah.
Right? And so inside the camp, around the tabernacle, you have these 70 people who are not with the rest of the people trying to get their...
they weren't there.
Yeah, they weren't there. They were being filled with the Spirit.
Yeah. Prophesying.
It's kind of funny because, like, if I was there, I think I'd be part of the people who ate. but and that's why I felt disturbed reading the story. I feel like God was like speaking to me about my gluttony. But so you have them choosing the Spirit of the Lord, choosing life, right? By the center of the camp. Right.
That's why these two stories were put together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I was figuring out, why is this together?
Yeah.
Now it makes sense because they had a choice. Was it only wings or only
Spirit of the God?
Yeah, exactly.
Spirit of God. I would choose only wings. To be fair, I would choose the only wings. like would I rather be in a prayer meeting?
Yeah.
For the whole day, just like, sending me the Spirit or
only wings.
I would choose the only wings. But there, it's like how Adam and Eve could have chosen to eat from the tree of life.
That's right.
Right? They could eat it every day.
Yeah.
Anytime they wanted, along with all the other trees, all the fruit in the garden.
Yeah.
And yet they chose death.
Yeah.
Right? they chose the thing that God told them that would lead them to exile and banishment. That's literally what those Israelites did. They went outside the camp, a day's journey.
Yeah, you mentioned that that's how far it was placed.
To go and gorge on some quail, and they get a severe plague. And the biblical author mentions that place was going to be known as
it's here.
Kibroth Hatava.
Graves of gluttony or
graves of desire.
Of desire, yeah.
Wow.
So the word ava, like what I mentioned, because they craved, at the start of the story, they desired the food, the forbidden food.
Yeah.
And so they named that place Kibroth Hatava because later on they buried those people who were craving, who craved in that place. It leads to death. It leads to death when we choose to redefine good and evil for ourselves.
When we eat from the tree of knowing good and bad.
Yeah. When we eat from the tree of knowing good and bad, which God said was, don't do that. That's bad. But death. We say, no, that's good.
Yeah.
And then when God says, let's go through the wilderness, we say, no, that's bad. But God says, that's good. Right?
Yeah.
It's this reversal and redefining that leads us to death.
Yep.
And if they want to survive here in the wilderness, which they can. They can. All they have to do is trust and obey the one who can provide a football field worth of birds, who can make manna rain every day, who can
to trust on the meal plan of God.
To trust. I love that.
Kasi hindi pa talaga panahon para mag-chicken.
Yeah.
Pero gusto nila mag-chicken.
Yeah.
You know the rabbi, I think I mentioned this in a previous episode, but the rabbis have like commented that God did intend for Adam and Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil one day. One day.
Yeah.
But what God wanted them to do first was to learn wisdom, true wisdom and true knowledge from Him day by day in their evening walks. But they kind of just wanted to rush into it. Let's grab that's a very, very common. It's a very, very interesting rabbi midrash that you read in the 3rd, 4th century. So I think that's exactly what you're talking about. It wasn't the time, but they were like, no, let's do it now.
And I feel like the wilderness is the training ground for that.
Yes.
God is training them to know which is good and which is bad.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is why we get these 3 false sequences, one after the other.
Yeah.
We didn't have time to talk about the 3rd one, but that's basically it.
But we did mention it. So we saw the jealousy.
Yeah.
So how would you tie up the story of this the complaints of the Israelites to the jealousy of...
Oh, yeah. So the sister of Moses, Miriam.
Okay. I was referring first to the Eldad and Medad, but yeah, we went through that already. But that's already the beginning of the jealousy happening.
Sure.
And then, you go to...
Oh, sorry. So you meant the Eldad and Medad was a separate complaint.
Yeah.
I see. I was counting 3 based on the first one when they stepped out. The second one was the people.
The food.
Yeah. And the third one being Miriam.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you count as well the complaint of the young man and Joshua, that would make it 4.
Right.
Yeah, but I feel like the way that it's structured, like that's a sub complaint, if that makes sense, within the within the bigger story.
So let's go to Miriam and Aaron already.
Yeah, well, just briefly to touch on it, Miriam was complaining, how come Moses gets all the credit? Like
the authority.
I did stuff too. Like I put him in a basket and made sure that
made sure he was alive.
If I had to do that, none of you would be.
I read a commentary. Like, Miriam was some prophet as well.
Yes.
And then Aaron was the high priest.
Yeah.
So we're doing all this.
Yeah.
And why is it that it's only Moses that has the authority or some sort of favor with God?
Yeah, exactly. And so it is a human who's complaining about another human who was appointed by God.
Their sibling.
Yes, that are siblings.
And just to
oh
tie
my
this
gosh,
idea,
they're siblings. You're so smart.
To tie the idea, like I think when you're on the road, and if the whole spirit of the camp was already complaining, and you're already whiny, it's so easy to start to be jealous. Right? Parang it's a natural next step.
It's gonna come
Yeah.
Parang they were already whiny, so it was just a natural step to get into jealousy and comparison and complaining. That's what Miriam and Aaron
what
fell
Teacher
into.
was saying was that Miriam and Moses are siblings, like Cain and Abel. Because what happens after Genesis 3 is Genesis 4, where you have a sibling
Rivalry.
who complains, why did God choose the other sibling?
Sibling rivalry.
Right, exactly. When actually God chose both of them.
Yeah.
It's just that the timings are different. Right? God tells Cain that, hey, if you do what is good, right? If you do what is tov, if you trust me, then won't you be lifted up too in the due time? Right? And so I think that that's probably the picture why they put Miriam's complaint right after. It's you have Genesis 1, which is the Numbers chapters 1 to 10, and then you have Genesis 3, which is Numbers 11. You have Genesis 4, Numbers 12. So
just to be also clear with Numbers 12, they first call out Moses on his wife's ethnicity. So they throw this like question on him, but their real issue was the authority and
exactly.
Why here?
And I wish we had more time to dive into it because there's a lot of cool things going on with like the leprosy and the stuff. But that will be for another time when we go to Numbers again. But I think for now, I hope that you, the listener, were able to see how cool the Bible is and how these design patterns, these cyclical patterns of, human being entrusted to lead, to be appointed for a special rule, God ordering the world and providing the human with everything that he needs only for the human to squander it, is something that we're going to see again and again and again throughout the Bible, particularly here in Numbers, which is God's classroom, as he teaches them what it means to trust and to live by his definition of good and evil. So I hope you learned something. You just want to say?
No, I was gonna say just to our listeners or our viewers, I think it's good to like listen to this hand in hand with the feast talk.
Oh yeah, sure.
Because this is like good to know, and it's like enriching your faith and your knowledge of scripture. But I think it'll hit hard more.
Sure.
Yeah, with the feast.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. The cyclical patterns of the Bible, like for me personally, it just reminds me of how life is. Life is often like that. That we're faced time and time again with these crossroads, whether to trust in God's definition of good or not. And most times we choose not, and we end up getting hit by a severe plague or worse. And the Bible sympathizes with that reality. It shows us that this has been the human condition for the longest time.
That's right.
And we need someone who will lead us to teach us what is good. And we meet him in the person of Jesus. And so that's why we continue to sit and study by the feet of the Torah, right? Because Jesus said it was important to. And because it shows us how much we need Jesus. We need the good shepherd to lead us through this wilderness. All right.
Final thoughts? Just to wrap things together. Or was that your final thoughts?
That was my final thoughts. You have any final thoughts?
No, it's just we're not done yet.
Yeah.
Because these people are gonna keep going. But every time we're gonna see that God will always be faithful to these people. And every time he invites them, trust in me. This is where you'll find life. Only if you can trust in me.
Yeah. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's life.
Yeah.
So choose life.
Choose life.
Not only wings. All right. So with that, we will see you on our next episode. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. And we're going to continue on our journey through Numbers together. Bye-bye.
Yay!